Hello, this is Mouse Gunner, and welcome to Blood Bowl 2. This video will continue a series of tutorials covering the rules and strategy of playing Blood Bowl. This time around, we'll be focusing on skills. Now, skills can be one of the more confusing elements of the game, especially to a new player. First off, you have the vast number of skills that exist in the game, 74 by my last count. And then secondly, every skill is going to affect the normal course of play in some way or another, or at least modify that course of play. So, if you're a newer player and you're just trying to learn the rules, the fact that these skills modify those rules in some way can really be a daunting challenge for those newer players to kind of keep track of everything. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to focus on a lot of the more basic and common skills, and then go over some that, although they're a little bit rarer, you'll encounter from starting characters. Now, a lot of skills you'll usually only encounter from more leveled up characters, so we won't be going over those in much detail, other than maybe a couple. So, these are the player cards that you will encounter, even in the normal game, whenever you select on a character. You'll have the stats over here, and then you have these icons that represent the skills. So each icon represents a different skill, and what is depicted in that picture will represent which skill that is. In the game, if you mouse over these icons, it will give you a description of what that skill is, but we'll go ahead and go over it in a lot of detail here in the team rosters so that we can take our time looking at the skills and what they do. Now, some players on your roster, for instance this lineman, will start with no skills as a basic character. As you see, there's no icons, and if I select on this character, you see under skills there's nothing there. Now, these characters are more affordable, and usually there's no limit on how many of these players you can have on a team, so they'll be the kind of player that you fill out your roster to get a full lineup of at least 11 players. Now, other characters a little bit more specialized may have a limit on how many players you can have on your team, but they will also be more expensive because this skill will add expense onto that character. All things else the same. For instance, a thrower has pretty much the exact same stats as a lineman, but because of the two skills that he starts with, he's a more expensive player to purchase. But let's start going over the different basic skills that you'll see. So when we select the blitzer here, we'll see that he starts with the block skill. Now, I've already discussed the block skill in my blocking video, but to just go over it very simply, this will modify the results of when you throw a block. So one of the results on that die is a both down, which is represented by the skull, and an explosion. A player with this ability will not be knocked down when this result is rolled. So this modifies how the blocking rules work. If we go on to another character, the catcher here, we'll see a couple other skills. We have the dodge skill and the catch skill. Now, both of these work in a very similar way. The catch skill gives you a reroll whenever you fail a catch roll or a handoff roll. The dodge skill gives you a reroll whenever you are trying to dodge out of an enemy tackle zone. So if you fail, you get that reroll. Now, these rerolls will not cost you a normal team reroll, and this character, although they can only use their skill once per turn, every character that has the dodge skill can use that dodge skill once per turn. So you could have multiple uses of a skill in that one turn. This also will modify the blocking results as well. So whenever a defender stumbles result happens, and this is the explosion with the exclamation point, it will instead be changed to a pushed result. So your character will not be knocked to the ground and possibly injured. And if they're carrying the ball, whenever you're knocked to the ground, you will drop the ball. So this makes it less likely that will happen. This makes the dodge skill a pretty powerful skill. Now, another thing I should go over is that every skill is put into a category of skills. So we see these categories over to the left here: general skills, agility skills, passing skills, strength, and mutation. There's also another skill category called the extraordinary skills. Now, extraordinary skills are skills that only certain characters will start with. So an example of this, I don't know if they're going to have a vampire team. I'm assuming they'll eventually have a vampire team. But a skill that a vampire would have that no other character would have is the bloodlust skill. This is an extraordinary skill. There's no way any other character can ever get those skills. Certain characters can get mutation skills, but as we can see from this character, this is grayed out. So when this character levels up, and when you level up, you always have the opportunity to gain more skills. This character can never gain the mutation skill. Some characters can get the mutation skill, but not this character. Usually speaking, this is more team linked. So like Skaven teams or Chaos teams can gain mutations, but a lot of other teams can't. And you also have this broken up into two categories of leveling up. You have normal skills and you have what are called double skills. Normal skills, if you get, when you do your roll to level up, if you roll the, gain a skill, then you can choose a normal skill, which for this character would either be a general skill or an agility skill. If you roll doubles on your level up roll, then you have the option of picking what the double skill. So these are less likely to occur, but in theory, this character can pick up pretty much any skill category available outside of mutation and extraordinary, depending on that level up roll. But again, the double skills are less likely to be picked up by this character. And which character you have selected will determine which of these skills are normal skills or double skills. So as an example, if we click on alignment, only general skills are available, not as a normal skill, not the agility, passing, or strength. Those are double skills, so this character would have to roll doubles to gain those skills. Now, examples of how these skills are categorized. So the block skill, being a pretty basic skill, is added into the general category. The catch and dodge skill are part of the agility category, as those are linked to agility rolls, or the stat rolls are agility involved. And we'll go over, like, for instance, passing skills. We'll go over here in a second when we click on our thrower. We have the pass skill, which is part of that passing category. Unfortunately, in the description here, they don't tell you what category this is in, but once we have the campaign part of the game unlocked, we'll see how the level up system works, but I'm going to assume that they're going to list, the skills based off of what category they're in. But pass pretty much allows you to re-roll any a throw attempt that fails. And sure hands allows you to re-roll picking up the ball from the ground. And this also will negate the strip ball skill if a character is trying to use that against you. So this is where you get a little bit of the confusing element of the game, because some skills will have overlapping effects on other skills. So the strip ball skill, just to explain very simply, is a general skill. And what that does is when you throw a block on a character carrying the ball, if it is a result as a push result or a defender stumbles result that gets turned into a push result, you will still knock the ball out of that character's hands. Normally, the only way to knock the ball out of that character's hands is to knock them actually to the ground. In this instance, the strip ball skill makes that even more likely of an occurrence, because also the push result will give you that same, stripping the ball effect. Well, sure hands means you can keep hold of the ball a little bit more firmly, so you will negate that strip ball skill. So that adds a little bit of complexity to the game, because, again, you have that overlapping skill effects. And we see with this character, the general skills and passing skills are normal, but everything else are double skills or not available. Okay, finally, we have the more complex character here with the Ogre, because first off, he has a large number of skills, but also those skills are a little bit rarer. So the first one we have is Bonehead. Now, Bonehead means that every time you try and use this character, you have to roll a 6-sided die. On a result of 1, this character will not do what you want them to do. And they'll just stand around, and they will also, this is one of the more negative elements of this, lose their tackle zone. That tackle zone will remain down until a future turn when you try and act with this character again, and they finally pass that roll. As long as they keep failing the roll, their tackle zones will remain down, and you will be unable to use this character. Having your tackle zones fall down or be removed with a high-strength character like this that you're more than likely going to have on the starting offensive line, or that front line, when you do your initial setup, is a big disadvantage, because it means that you can't really utilize his big strength to hold down players with the tackle zone. They can just run right past him. So you really don't want this result to happen, but it's just one of those things that's there. It can randomly happen. There's nothing really you can do about it. Now, this is an extraordinary skill that only certain characters can have, so you can't really normally pick this up. Mighty Blow will affect armor rolls or injury rolls. So whenever you knock a player down, there's going to be an armor roll to see if they get injured, and then if that armor roll fails, I guess for the character that is being knocked down, then there's a injury roll to see how severely they're injured. So this will add either to the armor roll or the injury roll. So this is going to make it more likely that they will be injured, and if they are injured, more likely they'll be injured more severely. This is a strength-related skill, which makes sense because the normal skills for this character are strength-related skills. This is often recommended for characters that are going to be throwing blocks often, for instance, characters that are in that offensive front line. I would recommend a couple other skills over this skill, but we'll talk about that in a second. We have the Thick Skull skill. This is another... Oh, this is not an extraordinary skill. I think this is linked to... Yeah, strength. This will change results that essentially halves the probability that you'll be knocked out, because when you do your injury roll, one of the results that would mean that you would be knocked out instead gets changed to a stun result, which is not as severe of an injury. So this is a slightly effective skill. Again, for a strength skill, I probably wouldn't choose this as one of the first skills to select if you're leveling up and you have strength skills available. A good example of a good strength skill to pick up, especially for a character of this type, is the guard skill. What the guard skill does is it ignores enemy tackle zones when that character is a candidate for assists. So essentially, this character will always give an assist to a friendly character that's throwing a block that it could give an assist to, and it pretty much ignores enemy tackle zones when that is being considered. That makes it a very powerful skill for characters going to be in that front offensive line as well, because they can work together to always give each other assists and make the enemy have a much more difficult time of pushing through that line. We have the Throw Teammate skill. This is another extraordinary skill, and this skill is very team dependent because it also requires the character that you throw to also have the right stuff skill, which is another extraordinary skill. A good team to reference for this is the Goblin team. So Goblins have the right stuff skill, and Trolls have the Throw Teammate skill. So Ogres and on a human team, this skill is meaningless because no human has that right stuff skill, and because the right stuff is a extraordinary skill, they could never gain it. So his throw teammate skill is not really relevant. But how it works is you essentially throw a character that has that right stuff skill like they're the ball through the air, and if you succeed, they'll go where you throw them. And then they have to roll to make sure they land on their feet. And if all of that happens, then they land on their feet and can take their turn normally if they haven't already acted. But the chance that they'll be... the pass will either be inaccurate, which I think makes it even more unlikely that they'll land on their feet, or the fact that they won't land at all on their feet makes it kind of not that likely to happen. They'll more than likely just fall wherever you throw them and then possibly be injured. And if they're carrying the ball, they will drop it. But this is one of those things that with a Goblin team, when the Goblin teams are very much about, randomness, this can be a very potent offensive move if it works. If you have that RNG in your favor, it can be a very powerful 1 or 2 turn score strategy, but the unlikeliness of it to succeed makes it not a very viable strategy. Okay, finally we have the Loner skill. The Loner skill works with team reroll. So whenever this character tries to use a team reroll, there's a 50% chance that it will fail. What I mean by that is it will fail to be used. So you'll burn the team reroll and not get to use it. So whatever result you got with the die roll will still stand. So this makes it so this character's, use of team rerolls is maybe not the best idea, because of the chance that you'll lose that team reroll and not get the benefit of it. And this kind of signifies the fact that this character is either, dumber character like an ogre, or maybe like a mercenary character. So a lot of star players will have the loner skill because they're not really used to working with you as a team. And that's what team rerolls represent, is your good team cohesiveness, and that character just not familiar with your team, or too dumb to understand that element of gameplay, just can't really use team rerolls very effectively. Okay, with that explained, I'm going to hop into another team here that has a few more skills that we haven't yet seen. And that's the Dwarf team. And this is one of the things about the Dwarf team. There's a lot of skills involved because every player on the roster has skills. And this can make it a not so great team for a beginning player to start with, just due to the complexity of how many skills you have involved. Now, the Longbeards are essentially your linemen. Whether or not they're the cheapest players, I don't remember, but they are your more basic characters. But they start with 3 skills. So you have the Black skill, which we've already discussed, the Thick Skull skill, which I think pretty much every dwarf has the Thick Skull skill. So that's something that you'll see on every dwarf as we go through here. And we have the Tackle skill. Now, this is the skill we haven't yet seen. And what this does is it pretty much negates the Dodge skill. So any instance that the Dodge skill could be used, when this character has a tackle zone on that character, or when this character is blocking a character with dodge, will be negated. So any character that tries to dodge out of this character's tackle zone won't be able to use their dodge skill. Any character blocked by this character that has the dodge skill won't get the benefit of the dodge skill. So this pretty much all it does is negate the dodge skill. But because the dodge skill is such a powerful skill, this is also a good skill to have. And this is one of the things, if you have an effective lineup or starting setup with the dwarves, can make a more dodging, agility oriented team have fits, because they can't use their dodge skill anymore. And they have to dodge through, if you really set up your tackle zones well, have to dodge through a ton of tackle zones, and they can't really take advantage of that dodge skill. Also, if a character with the dodge skill has the ball and you want to get that ball out of their hands by knocking them down, this makes it more likely for you to do that because they don't get to take advantage of their dodge skill. So, again, pretty powerful skill to negate a pretty powerful skill. Okay, let's look at some of the other characters. Now, the Blitzer has 2 skills that we've already seen, Thick Skull and Block, so I'm not going to go over them. But then we have the Troll Slayer, which is going to have a bunch of really complex skills. So we've already discussed Block and Thick Skull. Dauntless, pretty much whenever this character throws a block at a character that is stronger than them, a unit that's stronger than they are, they roll a d6. If they roll higher than that character's strength value, their strength value will be considered to be the same as whatever that character's strength value is. So as an example, that ogre that we were looking at before has 5 strength. So if this character were to roll that 6-sided die and get a 6 result, their strength would equal 5. So they wouldn't be at a disadvantage anymore for that block. Then you have the Frenzy skill. Oh, and by the way, if you equal or are lower than the strength of your opponent, then you just have whatever strength you normally would have for the block. Now, the Frenzy skill can be both a good thing and a bad thing. One of the reasons that it can be a bad thing is because it's not an optional skill. It always will work this way. So whenever you throw a block and you get a result that would be a push result. So it also says Defender Stumbles result, but what they mean by that is Defender Stumbles and it gets turned into a push result because they have the dodge skill, for example. That player must immediately throw another block against that opponent. So, and it says as long as they're both still standing and adjacent, but that's pretty much what would happen if you get a push result. You must also always follow up. You don't get a choice on whether to stand your ground or follow up. You always will follow up regardless of whatever the result of the block is. And in the case of a blitz, the second block will only happen if you have enough movement points to use it. It also says you can never have the grab skill. But the main element of this is the fact that it's not optional. You'll always throw that second block when that situation exists. So how this can be a bad thing is, let's say initially you go to throw the block and you have a decent number of assists that give you a strength advantage. You throw that block. The only legal spaces you can push that character into, though, is a space where you would no longer get an assist from any of your friendly characters. So you have to follow them up, and then you immediately have to throw another block. Maybe you've moved into a space that now the opponent gets assists that previously they didn't. This can make this turn from a situation where you had an advantage to one where you have a disadvantage, and you don't have the option to not take that second block. You have to take it. So that's one of the ways that Frenzy can be a bad thing. Also, not having that option on whether or not you follow up can also strategically put you in situations that maybe you don't want to be in. So, again, this can be a positive thing because it gives you a second chance at knocking down an opponent that you really need to knock down. But it also can be negative because you have to throw that second block and you also have to follow up. Okay, let's look at our last character to look at, and you can see by the vast number of skills he has, there's a lot of complexity behind this character. Alright, so the first skill we're going to go over is the break tackle skill. Now the break tackle skill, pretty much what this does is whenever you're trying to do a dodge, rather than use agility, which is what you would normally use to determine whether or not you succeed, you use your strength value instead. Now with this character having a very low agility value but a very high strength value means that the likelihood that they'll be able to dodge, very high. A lot higher than it would be if they didn't have this skill. Dirty player. Now this is one thing I didn't really discuss in my basics video, but anytime a player's been knocked down, you have the option to foul that player. Essentially kick them while they're down. This will essentially roll their armor and attempt to injure them. If you fail at your armor roll, you don't roll higher than their armor value, nothing happens. As long as the ref doesn't catch you, rolling doubles on 2 dice, because you roll 2 dice every time you do an armor check, will, if you roll doubles, then the ref sees you and catches you and you get thrown out. Well, you don't get thrown out immediately, but at the next stoppage of play, you're thrown out of the game. Then you can't come back into the game no matter what, once you've been thrown out. So in any case, when this character fouls, they get an extra +1 to either the armor roll or the injury roll. So it makes it more likely that the player that they're fouling will be injured or will be injured more severely. Now the Juggernaut skill is, again, one of those more complex skills because it affects a lot of other skills, and it also affects the normal rules. So when you use a blitz action with this character, you can negate the fend, stand firm, or wrestle skills. Now, all 3 of those skills will affect the way blocks happen, and I think we have the stand firm skill with this character, so we'll be going over that. But the fend skill, I believe, prevents the person that throws the block from following up, so they always have to stand their ground. We'll go over stand firm here in a little bit, and the wrestle skill affects the die results a little bit, and it's a very much more complex skill, so I'm not going to be going over that in any detail, but it will affect some of the results of blocks. So this skill will negate all 3 of those skills, and it also treats both down result as a pushed result, and that's simulating the momentum you're using, just kind of forcing that opponent to be pushed back rather than the negative result possibly of both down. Because this character doesn't have the block skill, both down would be a negative result for this character. So they turn a possibly negative result into a more neutral or positive one. Mighty Blow we've already discussed. No hands means that this character cannot pick up, intercept, carry the ball in any way, or catch the ball that as it's tumbling around or through the air or anything like that. So pretty much what this means is this character can never really carry the ball. Doesn't mean that they actually don't have hands. He has hands. At least the character model has hands. But as far as the game's concerned, this character can never carry the ball in any circumstance. Now, a secret weapon means that this character pretty much counts as committing a foul. So as I explained, at the stoppage of play, the referee will say, oh, this guy has a weapon, clearly. That's illegal. Get out of here. But they still get to act for that current course of play, or drive or down, whatever you want to call it. So this makes the effectiveness of this unit somewhat limited because it will only be that one course of play. Once a stoppage has happened, the referee will kick them out, and then they can no longer be used for the rest of the game. Now, there are things that can modify this. For instance, there is a random result on the kickoff table that I think the ref gets killed or something like that. And when that happens, the referee won't call any illegal plays during that course of play. Once the next stoppage of play occurs, though, no normal rules for gameplay will happen. So if you continue to use this character for the next drive or down, they will be thrown out unless you get another random, ref isn't going to call illegal plays. I think you can also bribe refs to negate, things like this, but I'm not positive on that. So I'm not for certain on whether bribes will negate this or not, but possibly they do. Now, the stand firm skill means that whenever this character is blocked and the result would push them into another square, they don't get pushed into that square. Instead, they either end up in the square they're already in. So even if you get the defender down result, they still go down, but they don't get pushed anywhere. They just end up in the space that they're already in. So this character can never really be pushed around, unless you have like the Juggernaut skill, which negates that ability. And then we have the Loner skill, which we've already discussed. So that's quite a lot of skills discussed, and some of these skills are not very common for a starting player. For instance, things like Dirty Player, Juggernaut, Stand Firm. They're not very common, nor is Secret Weapon, but they are skills that could potentially a character could start with. For instance, this character here. So that's why I went over them. And that's why I also went over the Dwarf team, because they had some kind of more unique skills that I thought we should go over. But in any case, hopefully I've cleared up a little bit of the confusion, complexity of, what skills are and how they work. The main ones you're going to be wanting to focus on are the block, dodge, pass, catch, and sure hand skills. As well as there are a couple others that are noteworthy, but those are the main basic skills that you will encounter with most teams, at least somewhere. So, for instance, our runner here has the sure hand skill. So, at least one character on an enemy team, unless they just pick basic linemen as their entire team, will have at least one of those skills. So, in this team, we're seeing a lot of occurrences of the block skill, and we also have the sure hand skill. With the human team, we had both the dodge, the block, also sure hands, pass. Pretty much all of those ones I mentioned were on that team somewhere. So those are the ones you're going to very commonly encounter. Otherwise, the other skills you kind of pick up as you go. In any case, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. This is Mouse Gunner, signing out.